1. This happened quite a few years ago, when I was a relatively young and sheltered high school student, probably 15 years old. Some of my close friends and I decided to go to the drive-in movie theater one night. When they show 2 movies in a row and the whole shebang ends pretty late at night, probably around 1 a.m. or so. The 5 of us all drive in my friend Erin's car, and as we're putting the seats down and setting the back of the car up with blankets and pillows, Erin recognizes a guy, David, that she had met a few times because he worked at her gym. He was at the drive-in alone, not necessarily weird, just not something many people did in my town, and came over to our car to chit-chat. Immediately one of my other friends, Corin, took a liking to this guy and began flirting up a storm. It wasn't soon until Corin invited him to watch the movie with us, inside Erin's car. It also wasn't soon until this David guy offered us, 15 to 17-year-olds, alcohol, which we accepted. Looking back now, what a red flag. I was wary of this David character as he appeared a lot older than us, mid-20s, and gave me somewhat of a weird vibe. But since Erin seemed to know him, and my friends weren't acting alarmed, I didn't give it too much thought. We're not even 15 minutes into the movie, and I am just too uncomfortable to be enjoying myself. 6 people crammed into the back of one car, and Corin and David cuddling, flirting, who knows what underneath the blankets, made me want to get out of there ASAP. So when David suggested that me and my 3 remaining friends could watch the movie in his car while he stayed in Erin's car, and canoodled, I jumped to take him up on the offer. David's car was a small sedan with little room, so we had to sit in the seats normally, as if we were about to ride in the car. Although I was a little uncomfortable sitting in the driver's seat with the steering wheel between me and the screen, I was glad to finally have some personal space. That all changed when I dropped my phone and had landed somewhere underneath the driver's seat. While blindly reaching underneath to find my phone, I grabbed onto a hard object that I realized was a lot heavier than my iPhone when I began to lift it up. To my complete and utter surprise, I realize it's a gun. I had never seen a real-life gun before at that point in my life, so it could have been fake or a BB gun or whatever else. But it looked real, felt real, and was hidden underneath the driver's seat for easy access. It freaked me out, because even if it was a fake gun, what could he be intending to use it for besides intimidation? For whatever reasons, my friends didn't find this as startling as I did, and they managed to calm me down and concluded the best thing to do was just to put it back underneath the seat where I found it. That was fine to me, as I didn't plan on ever being in this car again once the movie was over, and definitely didn't plan on being in the car when David was in it, ever. The rest of the 2 movies went by fine. We're drinking beer that this David character so kindly provided us, and having a fun time. It's late by the time the 2nd movie ends, and I'm ready to get back to our friend Erica's house, where we were sleeping for the evening. I hop out of David's car, ready to get back into Erin's car, when I see Erin's car already driving away. Corin pops up and cheerfully announces, "David has offered to drive us home. How nice of him, right?" Having no other way to get home, being slightly intoxicated, and watching the rest of my friends pile into the car, I followed suit, even though I had my hesitations. David sat in the driver's seat, I sat behind David, and Corin sat shotgun, beginning to play her signature Justin Bieber playlist through the speakers. The car ride started out normal enough, with Erica giving directions to her house, Corin not paying attention to anything but her Bieber, and me feeling uneasy and hyper-aware of the situation. As we are approaching Erica's house, David asks us if we have time to make a quick drive up to the reservoir, which was located on the outskirts of town. Very isolated, and surrounded by heavy, wooded area. It's probably close to 2 a.m. at this point. The only person who even slightly knew this random man had left us. And I know there is a very real-looking gun underneath the seat of this guy's car that he doesn't know I know about. So of course I say no. David just says, "We're going up to the reservoir." Confused and alarmed, I start politely protesting, saying that we really don't have time. We're being expected at home, yada yada. But with every word I say, David turns the volume of the music up louder and louder, drowning out my voice and obviously ignoring me, as he starts to head up the long dark road that leads to the reservoir. I go into panic mode, annoyed that none of my friends are doing anything, especially Corin, who is still singing along to Bieber. I start to freak out. I decide that he can't take us up to the reservoir, he just can't. What if the gun isn't real, but he still uses it to threaten us to do something? A million thoughts race through my head. I won't let him take us into a secluded area where any number of things could happen, and no one could hear us. I decide if he's going to do something to us, I would rather risk it being here, in town, on a more populated road where our chances of survival, or whatever, were better. So, I literally freak out. All sense of politeness I felt I needed to have is gone. I start kicking the back of his chair with both my feet, screaming at the top of my lungs that he needs to take us back, now. I roll down the window and start shouting, trying to cause a scene, doing anything I can to try to stop this man from driving us up to the middle of nowhere. I don't stop kicking and screaming until he relents, almost scoffs and says, "Fine," as if I was some crazy lady completely overreacting to the situation. I don't care what he thinks. I am just relieved he has turned the car around and is actually taking us back to Erica's house. Once we get there and run out of the car, we wake up Erica's parents to let them know what happened, since this guy now has one of our addresses. I didn't sleep that whole night, and my friendship with Corin was irreparably damaged from her putting me in such a terrifying situation, just because she had the hots for this guy. Creepy drive-in movie theater guy with a hidden gun who doesn't listen to scared 15-year-old girls. Let's not meet. 2. When I was 19, I hung out with a great group of friends I'd known throughout high school. Mark, Roy, O, Dan, and Rob. This particular summer we all had gotten a bit closer and hung out practically every day, spending the scorching Texas heat indoors while waiting to goof off once the sun began to set. Our main hangout spot was usually at O's home. His mother was very nice and let us use her attic freely, so long as we treated their home with respect, which we, of course, did. However, O didn't exactly live in the safest part of town. Not that we ever felt unsafe. It was just the kind of place we were told to keep our wits about us. This particular evening was special, since the guys had each bought themselves new skateboards and wanted to spend the night trying them out. I was the only girl, and while I loved the boys, sometimes I just wanted a little time away from their antics to be by myself. I didn't want to go home or anything. It was just one of those moments where I wanted to walk and clear my head for a few minutes. This was pretty normal for me, and the guys respected that I wanted my space sometimes. However, they always insisted one of them go with me if it was after dark. I was only 5'1", and barely weighed 105 pounds, so I always understood that they just wanted to make sure I was safe in this rougher neighborhood. So the guys volunteered Roy to go with me, and he, with a groan, grabbed his skateboard and complied. I felt bad that because I needed to get some air, he was missing out on all the fun, but he reassured me that he was fine. We walked for a little while before he asked if I'd be okay by myself, while he took his board and rode around the area super quick. I could see our group of friends from where we stood, and while it was really dark, I felt safe. So I told Roy I'd be fine, and I'd wait for him on the curb we were at. He said again that he'd be back quickly, and off he went. I sat on the curb for a while, taking in the nice breeze and enjoying the alone time, when I noticed a worn-down black car pulling up to the four-way stop close by. There was nothing particularly special about it, so my attention drifted back over to my friends who were still enjoying themselves. By the time I looked back at the four-way, the car was still there. I saw no other cars at the stop, so I found it odd that it had yet to take off. I reasoned that they were probably distracted by their phone or kids or something small like that. Regardless, their lingering presence was starting to unsettle me. When I checked the time, I realized Roy had been gone nearly 10 minutes now, and I was beginning to get a little anxious. This car remained stationary for another few minutes before it finally started to move again. It made a left turn down another street, and I instantly felt more at ease now that it was gone. Roy's quick ride was taking a little too long, and at 15 minutes, I was done waiting for him, so I got up, dusted myself off, and prepared to make my way back to the group. As I prepared to take a step, I noticed the black car was back at the four-way stop again. This time the lights were off. The car was clearly on, I could hear the engine, but it again was just parked there. Because the headlights were off, I could clearly see two men sitting in there, just staring at me. I kept telling myself I was overthinking the situation, that they weren't looking at me, and maybe they were just lost. That's when the car started moving again, very slowly, this time straight toward the area where I was at. Even though they were moving slowly, I didn't want to cross the street until after they passed me. I don't know why, but something was telling me to just wait. Once I saw the car slowly going past me, I started making my way forward and toward my group of friends. All of a sudden, the car came to a screeching brake. It caught me off guard, and my heart skipped a beat. I instinctively took a few steps back up onto the curb. I could see now that the car was very beaten up, with peeled-off purple window tint. Yet it was still too dark for me to see inside through the side and back windows. I tried walking behind and away from the car, but they quickly reversed and put themselves between me and the other side of the street. I barely had time to react to this, before the passenger side window opened sharply, and a tallish man with long, dark, unkempt hair stepped out, and said in a very deep voice, "Get in the car." He didn't yell, in fact, he hardly raised his voice at all, but just the way he said it made my blood run cold. He was staring at me with so much hate in his eyes. I had no idea who this man was, but I felt his hate in my core. I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't react. I could hear the driver yelling to hurry up, as the long-haired man quickly reached out to grab my arm. I pulled away and tried to yell out, but my voice felt so small. He was trying to get me in that car, and if he was successful, I knew that would be it for me. The driver opened up his door in what I'm assuming was his attempt to come over and help his friend get me in the car, when I heard irate yells coming from the other side of the street and getting closer. The boys, my boys, were screaming at the men to get away from me. I couldn't see them, but I could hear their heavy footsteps getting louder. That's when the long-haired man let me go, and he and the driver ran back inside the car and peeled out. My friends got to me, and Mark and Dan tried, unsuccessfully, to catch up to the car on their skateboards. When we regrouped, they asked me if I was all right, but I was honestly too scared to really say anything. I think I must have been shaking because the guys just hugged me and kept telling me I was okay. Just then, Roy skates towards us asking what the hell happened. Mark started yelling at him for leaving me alone, and I honestly thought he was going to punch him. I kept trying to explain that it wasn't Roy's fault, but everyone was too pumped up on adrenaline to listen to anything. That's when we all noticed the same goddamn car was back. They began to circle the lot, peeling out loudly around us and just staring us down. I'm sure the boys must have also been scared, but they still stared back at the two men, holding up their skateboards like they were preparing to use them as bats. We must have made enough commotion at some point because someone must have called the cops on us. We could hear the police sirens in the distance blaring and getting closer. That's when the guys in the car got the hell out of Dodge and drove down another street and out of the neighborhood. As soon as they left, we all ran back to O's house. Someone said we should go back and tell the police what happened. And in retrospect, we should have. But after everything, I just wanted to go home and forget that night ever happened. I'm 30 now, and unfortunately, I still remember that event so clearly. I haven't spoken to the boys in a while. though I do talk to O occasionally. Every time we talk, that crazy night is brought up, and we realize just how young and scared we were. To those two guys who tried to kidnap me, let's never meet again. 3. Let me start with some background info. I was 16 at the time and I had just gotten my license. In order to celebrate my newfound freedom, I thought I'd take a camping trip with some friends and family. Besides having something to celebrate, my brother had just come into town and I couldn't think of a better bonding experience than to go camping with him. For the sake of anonymity, I'll just refer to him as Jack. So anyway, my brother had just arrived at my house from out of town, and we needed to do some things before the big camping trip that was less than 3 days away. Part of the reason my brother was in town was to empty an old storage shed he had, from when he had lived in the area. The storage company had raised its rent and he could no longer afford to keep his things there. So, being the only one with a truck, I agreed to help him empty the shed, so that he didn't have to pay to rent a moving truck. We started early in the morning, taking a drive out to the shed, which was about 15 minutes from the house. We got there, and began to load my truck up with his belongings, and before long, the truck was full and we were making a trip back to my place to unload his stuff. This went on for about a few hours, making trips back and forth, until I got low on gas and we decided to call it for a bit. So we returned home with what we had unloaded, and decided to kick back until my mother got home from work. She finally got home at around 7 p.m. We had dinner and cleaned up, before I mentioned that we should get back and finish unloading the rest of his things. But being newly licensed, my state has restrictions on how late I could be on the road, and it was already about an hour past the cutoff time. I asked if we could just finish it tomorrow, but she informed me that the time for the trip got moved up, and we had to leave tomorrow morning for the campgrounds. Not wanting me to break the law, but having no other option, she told me she would just follow behind us until we got to the storage shed, where she would help us finish unloading the shed. She couldn't ride with me because my truck is only a 2-seater, and my brother couldn't drive her car because at the time, he didn't have his license. So we were left with no other option. We got ready and hopped into our cars, making our way back to the storage shed. We managed to fit everything left into the back of my truck. Now having everything loaded, my mom mentioned that we needed some last-minute supplies for camping, so we decided to stop at the Ingalls on the way home. Big mistake. We got everything we needed from the Ingalls, and just in time as we were the last customers for the night. We headed out into the empty parking lot and loaded my mom's car up with the supplies. Now ready to get home, we hopped into my truck, but before we could close the doors, a red sedan pulled into the parking lot and began to head in our direction. Not thinking anything of it, my brother and I closed our car doors, and as we did, a golf ball came free from my brother's stuff and bounced out of the bed of my truck and onto the pavement. Focusing on what fell from the bed of my truck, I was suddenly caught off guard as I heard the distinct sound of tires screeching across asphalt. I quickly looked in my rearview mirror and saw the red sedan speeding towards the back of my truck, now in a panic, thinking that whatever is driving that car is going to ram into the back of my truck. I slammed my car into drive and stepped on the gas, lurching forward. And before long I was approaching 60 as I sped away from the car that was determined to catch me. I had to slow in order to take the turn that was approaching, and as I did, I heard the voice of a woman screaming for me to stop. I was dead set on running, but my brother insisted I stop the truck, which I reluctantly did. After I came to a stop, the lady in the red car pulled up to my passenger side, and my mother pulled up behind her. Panic and adrenaline setting in, I waited for her to speak. "Have you seen my son?" she screamed, which took me aback, as I fully expected some enraged lady demanding to know why we had thrown a golf ball out of my truck. "No," I replied, staggering over my words. "My son was supposed to be here." "I'm sorry, we haven't seen him," my brother calmly replied. "I saw a child's ball come from your truck. I know you have my son." Getting a little irate that this woman had just tried to ram me, and is now insisting that we had taken her son, I came back with, "We don't have your son, my truck is a two-seater. There is no room anywhere for your son to be. And as far as the ball goes, a golf ball came loose from the stuff in the back of my truck. We don't have your son. Call the police if you can't find him." She paused for a moment before replying with, "So you haven't seen my mother?" "Your mother? I thought you were looking for your son." She replied with, "Yes, my mother is supposed to be here with my son." At this point, my mom steps out of her car and approaches the lady. "Can I help you?" But the lady completely ignores her. Pulling up her phone, she presses a button and begins to speak with someone on the phone. "Yes, please? I'm here with two teenage boys driving a Chevrolet S10. Yes, it's the extreme model." "Whoa, hold up, we didn't do anything. Why are you giving our information to the police?" I said, anger now filling my voice. "Because you know where my father is, I mean son. Yes, I have them here." She pauses for a moment before whispering into the phone, "Got him." Now knowing I was right in my suspicions, I barked out to my mom, "Mom, get back in your car now." She looked to me with anger at first, but then realizing something is wrong, concerned not waiting any longer, she turned back and hopped into her car. "I'm past curfew and can't be out any longer. Good luck with your son," I said to the lady before I hit the gas, peeling out of the parking lot and onto the road. But when I looked into my rearview mirror, I saw the lady had followed. "Call Mom and tell her not to go straight home. Take every back road until that lady is no longer behind us." And with that, I threw my wheel to left and took off down the road. I began to take every left and every right I could. Everything to shake this lady off my tail. While I was doing this, my brother had called our mother and explained the situation to her. Thank God my truck has some get-up, because before long we had lost the lady. Now having lost her, we headed back to our house, speeding the entire way. By the time we arrived home, my mother was already there. I parked my car and jumped out, happy to be safe and home. After explaining what I thought was going on to my mother, we headed into the house and debated whether or not to call the police. We stupidly decided not to. My mom tried to calm me down, but my heart still had not settled. After waiting for about an hour in the kitchen, fully expecting to see the headlights of the woman's car illuminate my dimly lit driveway, thankfully nothing happened, and we headed off to bed. Needless to say, I didn't get a very good sleep that night. The next day we unloaded the truck of my brother's stuff, packed what we needed and hit the road. We had an amazing camping trip with no further incidents from the lady. Now on to what I think was happening. I believe that the lady was pulling a damsel in distress on us. I think she was trying to get us to believe she needed help so that we would stop and attempt to help her, all the while she was in contact with someone else, who she would get to come and drop us. It was just so unexpected. She was so close to ramming her car into the back of mine, which I think was a botched plan to keep us there. Because if she had hit me, I wouldn't have been going anywhere. The entire thing was unsettling. The way she couldn't get her story right is what started to clue me in on what was going on. And then when she whispered into the phone, "We got him," I knew we just had to get out of there. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I really do wish we would have called the police so that they could have intervened. I really hope that her tactics didn't work on anybody else. So to the lady who tried to ram her car into mine and insisted I kidnapped her son, let's not meet again. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 336. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. I'd like to thank everybody who joined me for the stream on Saturday, unless I was free and did it on Friday. I'm hoping to get these videos done early. It might be the last one for a little while until I can work out a plan of action for the next one, because I'm just about done with the family pictures. So whatever was on the stream on Friday or Saturday would have been the last that need to be fancied up, need to be repaired or whatever. So everything else will be in good condition. So I'm likely going to go through, pick discussion topics, that sort of thing, talk about films, whatever's in the news, that sort of thing, and we'll see what I come up with. I need to think of what I can put on the screen that won't cause any problems. Although I have considered writing while chatting, but I'm not sure how much writing I'd get done. I do really need to finish that Holmes script I was working on. I don't know if I'll get it done this year. I'm focusing on getting a bunch of scary stories, fictional scary stories for Halloween recorded this week. So we'll see what I come up with. Okay, and with that I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.